The strongest men of the village stood defeated. Their bulky muscles were useless against the massive rock that had trapped their water source. The village was dying of thirst. Their only hope now rested on the man they had always prevented from even crossing their wooden bridge, the man they called a burden on the earth. This is the story of Samuel, the overweight man, and how the weight that the world despised became the force that moved a mountain and saved a village. Samuel was not just a fat man. He was a gentle giant. His steps were slow and heavy, yet his heart was light and full of compassion. He lived in a secluded hut on the other side of the valley, separated from the village by an old wooden bridge. That bridge was the village's lifeline, but it was also the source of Samuel's daily humiliation. The bridge was old and fragile, and the village lived in constant fear that it might collapse. Therefore, the village elder issued a strict law forbidding Samuel from crossing it. Hakim, the bridge guard, was a thin, anxious man who enforced this law to the letter. Every time Samuel tried to cross to sell his wood or buy his necessities, Hakim would stop him, shouting loudly so everyone could hear, "The law is clear, Samuel. You are too heavy. We won't risk our bridge for you." Samuel saw in the villager's eyes a mix of pity and mockery. He never argued. He silently turned around and took the long, exhausting path around the valley, a journey that took hours instead of minutes. The bridge was a symbol of their belonging, and he was a symbol of their exclusion. One autumn night, unprecedented rains poured down. The mountains surrounding the village shook, and in the heart of the night, a tremendous crash was heard. By morning, the villagers awoke to a disaster. A colossal rock, the size of a small hut, had rolled down the mountain and settled atop the spring, their only water source. The once abundant flow of water dwindled to a thin, slow drip. Panic spread throughout the village. Water is life, and their lives were now trapped behind a stone. The village's strongest men, the ones with the bulging muscles who had laughed at Samuel's size, gathered ropes and wooden cranes. They tried for hours, their faces reddened with effort, veins bulging, shouting and pushing, but the rock did not move an inch. Their cranes broke, their hands tore, yet the boulder remained firm, mocking their feeble strength. They sat on the ground, defeated, gasping from exhaustion and helplessness. Samuel arrived at the scene, having traveled his long route as usual. He said nothing. He appeared to circle the rock, not as an enemy to be defeated with brute force, but like a craftsman studying a piece of wood. He observed its points of contact, felt its cracks, understood how it rested on the ground. He realized the problem was not strength, but the way it was applied. The rock did not need a sudden push. It needed immense, steady, continuous pressure. He stepped forward calmly and said, "Let me try." Hakim, the bridge guard, sneered. "And what will you do? Sit on it to warm it up?" But a wise old woman in the village, who always found a basket of the finest wood at her door from Samuel, spoke loudly, "Let him be. Your strength has failed. Perhaps his patience will succeed. We have nothing to lose." Everyone fell silent, watching to see how this man would fail. Samuel did not bring ropes. Instead, he began gathering small stones, placing them under his feet to create a solid base. Then he found a huge tree trunk and inserted it into a crack at the base of the giant rock, crafting a primitive lever. He did not jump on it or shake it violently like the others had. He placed his shoulder under it and used the weight of his entire body. It was not a push, but a slow, steady tilt. There were no shouts, only the sound of Samuel's deep measured breaths and the friction of wood against rock. A minute passed with no change. 5 minutes. The villagers began to fidget. Then, after several more minutes of unrelenting pressure, a sound emerged, not loud, but a deep groan from the earth beneath. Small grains of dirt began to fall from under the rock. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the massive rock began to tilt, millimeter by millimeter. Samuel increased the pressure, every muscle in his body screaming. Finally, with a grinding sound, the rock rolled aside. Clear, fresh water burst from the liberated spring, flowing powerfully and joyously. The villagers let out a deafening cheer, not just for the water, but for the miracle they had witnessed. They turned to Samuel, who stood panting, sweat covering his face. They no longer saw a tired, overweight man, but a mountain of flesh and bone who had saved them. Hakim the bridge guard approached, his face filled with shame. He said nothing, only gesturing silently toward the bridge, a silent, respectful invitation. That day, Samuel crossed the bridge for the first time, not alone, but with the entire village following, celebrating him. The bridge was no longer a symbol of his isolation, but a symbol of his victory. The villagers learned a lesson they would never forget. They had feared the weight that might break a few wooden planks, but that very weight had saved them from a deadly thirst. They realized true strength comes in many shapes and sizes, and the heaviest burdens sometimes carry the greatest power. Samuel was no longer a burden on the earth. He was the man who could move it. He proved that a person's value is not measured by what a bridge can bear, but by how much patience and strength their heart can hold. If the story of this hero Samuel inspired you, subscribing is the bridge that will carry us to our next tales. Join us